So today we're going to ask the question, how can we find the perimeter of a rectangle or a square? So if we look at the word perimeter, in the middle of it, we see the word rim. If we think about the rim of a basketball hoop, we know the rim is around the outside. So a perimeter is the measure of the space around the outside of an object. Today we're going to be talking about outsides of rectangles and squares. So to find the perimeter, we can use a formula to find the perimeter of a rectangle or square. So we first need to think about just this word formula. So let's think about what a formula is. So it says to use a formula is a mathematical rule. A rule is something that doesn't change. Let's look at this formula that we see here. So the formula that we see here has a couple different variables. A variable is a letter that represents an unknown number. We first see the letter P. P stands for perimeter. We do not know yet the measurement of the perimeter, so instead of putting a number, we'll simply just put the letter P until we find out what that P in perimeter represents and what the measurement of the perimeter is. The second variable that we see is an L. The reason that we chose the letter L this time is because that L represents the length. The third unknown number that we have is the width. We don't yet know the width, so we use the letter W to represent the width. So if we look at this section on the side, we can see that a length is usually on the bottom, widths are usually on the side. Keep in mind it does not matter which we decide to have the length and width of, because we know that multiplication and addition can move. It's commutative. Let's look at this rectangle. Look at this rectangle. We see that the length is 18 meters. The width is 14 meters. Pay close attention to these units because it tells us important information. So if we come back over here to our formula, we know the formula for perimeter is P equals 2 times the length plus 2 times the width. So now that we have the length, we can plug that in place of our L. So underneath this formula, we're going to rewrite our new formula with the unknown numbers that we find. So 2 times L can change to 2 times 18 because we found the length is actually equal to 18. So we substituted this L for an 18. Let's do the same thing for 2 times W. Let's rewrite this with the number we found that represents our W or width. So we know that 14 represents our width. So when we rewrite this section below it, 2 times W, we can write 2 times 14. So now we have 2 times 18 and 2 times 14. In the next step of our equation, we're going to rewrite our equation, but instead of writing 2 times 18 again and 2 times 14, we're going to solve each of these parts. And we know that since they're in parentheses, that means we solve these parts first. So 2 times 18 can be done by setting up some scratch work. So we know we start in our ones place. 8 times 2 is 16. Next we move to our tens place on the top, but still using the 2 from the bottom. 2 times 1 is 2, plus our 1 from the top is 3. So 2 times 18 is actually 36. Next, instead of writing 2 times 14, I'm actually going to solve 2 times 14. So 14 times 2 can be done the same way. Let's start in our ones place. 4 times 2 is 8. Now let's multiply our 2 times 1. 2 times 1 is 2. So instead of writing 2 times 14, we're going to write 28. Now we know the last step to find our formula, or to solve our formula for perimeter, is to add 36 plus 28. So if I want to add 36 plus 28, I can set up my problem like I just did on the top and start with my ones place. 6 plus 8 is 14. I'm going to carry my 1, write my 4 below. 3 plus 2 is 5, plus 1 more is 6. So my answer is 64. The perimeter of the rectangle is 64 meters. So today, we can use this to help us answer problems such as this. Julio is putting a stone border around his rectangular garden. The length of the garden is 7 feet. The width of the garden is 5 feet. How many feet of stone border does Julio need? Remember, the perimeter is the distance around a shape. So let's take a look at our rectangular garden and first start with a model. So I know that the length is 7 feet. The width of the garden is 5 feet. I can use my formula. Perimeter is equal to 2 times the length plus parentheses 2 times the width. Remember, we add those parentheses in because that tells us what we're doing first. So we have 2 variables, 3 actually, the P, the L, and the W. To find our value of P, let's rewrite our equation, but this time instead of our L and W, let's put our length as 7 feet and our width is 5 feet. So instead of 2 times L, I'm going to write 2 times 7. Instead of 2 times W, I'm going to write 2 times 5. So now we can solve what's in our parentheses in our next step. Instead of 2 times 7, I'm going to solve for 2 times 7, and I'm going to write 14. I still need my addition symbol. And in the next step of rewriting my equation, I'm going to write, instead of 2 times 5, write the answer. 2 times 5 is 10. So now my last step, I'm going to say perimeter is equal to, instead of 14 plus 10, I need to write the answer. So I can add 14 plus 10. If I do that, I can start in my ones place. 4 plus 0 is 4. Move to my tens place. 1 plus 1 is 2. So my answer is 24. When I come back here, I can write 24. Now we want to be very careful. Remember the unit that we looked at. 24 feet is going to be my answer for my perimeter. Now today, while you're working, you're going to be looking at many different problems. A couple things to keep in mind. We're going to be using our formula to find the perimeter of the rectangle, just like this problem is guiding you through. Also keep in mind, when we're looking at rectangles, some of them might look like this. And remember that we know the opposite sides of a rectangle are equal, such as this side will be 8, just like this side will be 4. A couple other things to keep in mind is rectangles can look very different as long as they have opposite sides that are equal and are 4 right angles. So if you look at number 2 looks kind of similar to the rectangle that we have on top. But if you look at 3, it looks a little different than this rectangle. It's turned. Number 4 is actually a square. We know that squares have the same formula. P is equal to 2 times the length plus 2 times the width. Squares have the same formula for finding the perimeter as a rectangle does. All right, guys. Good luck, everybody, and remember while you're working today to think about using our formula to find the perimeter.